Chapter 21. The DuPont Secrets, New Orleans. July 1925. The twilight settled over New Orleans like a velvet shroud, the gaslights along St. Charles Avenue flickering to life as the city transitioned from the heat of day to the sultry danger of night. Julien Dubois stood in the shadows of a magnolia tree, its blooms heavy with scent, his dark eyes fixed on the DuPont mansion across the street. The mansion's marble facade gleamed under the gaslight, its wrought iron gates a silent barrier between the city's elite and the darkness they harbored. The anointed silver medallion hung around his neck, its glow dim but steady, a reminder of the power they'd need to face whatever waited inside. At 35, Julien was a man forged by the fires of this investigation, his Creole heritage, his Catholic faith, and the supernatural reality of vampires, ghouls, and shadowy entities, now a part of his very being. The fresh stitches on his side and arm ached, a lingering reminder of the battle at the Tchoupitoulas Street warehouse, but Julien pushed the pain aside, his resolve unyielding. The spirit girl from his past, her hollow eyes in the bayou, marking him as the marked one, whispered in his mind, a haunting echo tied to the entity Leroux had tried to summon, an entity the DuPonts were still working to bring into the city. His hand brushed the rosary in his pocket, a reflex that felt more like a battle cry than a prayer, his dark eyes blazing with determination to end this nightmare. Celeste Moreau stood beside him, her practical blouse and trousers a stark contrast to the opulence of the avenue, her auburn hair tied back, her green eyes sharp with focus. At 28, she was a journalist whose pursuit of truth had led her into the heart of darkness, her small derringer reloaded and tucked into her waistband, her purse, holding Leroux's journal, her notepad, and the 1895 case file, slung across her shoulder. The journal's revelations about the DuPonts, New Order, and the shadowy entity had turned this investigation into a war for the city's soul, and Celeste was determined to expose the truth, to protect Julien, to stop the DuPonts before they could succeed where Leroux had failed. She glanced at Julien, her expression a mix of determination and concern, sensing the toll this fight was taking on him. Eloise Dubois fidgeted nearby, her simple blouse and skirt blending into the shadows, her dark hair tied back, her beads clinking softly as she clutched her small knife, her gaze darting to the mansion. At 25, she was a jazz singer who'd found her strength in this nightmare, her earlier betrayal, coerced by Leroux, now a distant memory as she proved her loyalty with every step. Her bandaged arm ached from the warehouse fight, but her resolve was unshaken, her voice a tense whisper. "You sure this mate'll help us, Celeste?" she asked, her beads a faint rhythm in the stillness. "If she's scared of Marcel, she might turn us in." Celeste nodded, her green eyes steady as she spoke, her voice low. "Her name's Clara. She's been feeding me tips for years, small things about the elite. She hates Marcel, hates what the DuPonts do behind closed doors. She'll help us, but we need to be quick. She's meeting us at the servants' entrance, west side, near the garden." They moved silently along the mansion's perimeter, keeping to the shadows of the oak-lined street, the servants' entrance a narrow door hidden behind a hedge of jasmine, its scent cloying in the humid air. Clara was waiting, a young woman in her early 20s, her maid's uniform crisp but her brown eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling as she unlocked the door, her voice a shaky whisper. "You're late," she said, her Creole accent soft, her gaze darting to the garden. "Marcel's in a meeting, some bigwigs from the city. You've got maybe an hour before they're done." Julien stepped forward, his dark eyes meeting hers, his voice gruff but reassuring, his Creole accent a soft cadence. "We'll be quick, Clara," he said, his hand resting on the medallion, its glow flaring faintly as he spoke. "We need records, anything tying the DuPonts to Leroux, to the rituals. You know where they keep 'em?" Clara nodded, her hand still trembling as she led them inside. The servants' corridor a narrow passage of peeling paint and dim light, the air heavy with the scent of polish and fear. "Marcel's study," she whispered, her voice barely audible as they moved. "Second floor, east wing. He keeps a safe behind the portrait of his father, papers, ledgers, things he don't want no one to see. But there's guards, vampires, I think. I've heard him his sin at night." Celeste's green eyes narrowed, her hand brushing the derringer at her waist, her voice a tense whisper. "We'll handle the guards," she said, her journalist's mind already racing, her gaze darting to Julian. "You and Eloise get to the study. I'll create a distraction, draw Em away." Julian hesitated, his jaw tight, his dark eyes filled with worry as he spoke, his voice gruff. "Be careful," he said, his hand brushing her arm, a gesture of care that felt natural now. "If it gets bad, you get out. Don't wait for us." Celeste nodded, her green eyes softening for a moment before her resolve returned, her voice a promise. "I'll be fine," she said, slipping down a side corridor, her movements quick and silent as she disappeared into the shadows. Julian and Eloise followed Clara up a narrow staircase, the mansion's opulence a stark contrast to the servants' quarters, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls adorned with oil paintings of stern-faced DuPont ancestors. They reached the second floor, the east wing a long hallway of closed doors, the study at the far end, its door ajar, a faint light spilling into the corridor. Clara paused, her voice a shaky whisper as she pointed, her hands trembling. "That's it," she said, her brown eyes wide with fear. "I'll keep watch, hurry." Julian nodded, his hand tightening on his revolver, the medallion's glow flaring brighter as he and Eloise slipped into the study. The room was a fortress of wealth, mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books, a massive desk cluttered with papers, a portrait of Marcel's father glaring down from above a fireplace. Julian moved to the portrait, pulling it aside to reveal a small safe, its dial gleaming in the lamplight. Eloise stood by the door, her knife at the ready, her beads clinking softly, her gaze darting to the hallway. Julian worked quickly, his ear pressed to the safe as he turned the dial, the faint clicks echoing in the tense silence, his dark eyes narrowing with focus. The safe clicked open, revealing a stack of ledgers, letters, and a small, leather-bound book, its cover etched with the same crescent moon symbol they'd seen in LaRue's rituals. Julian pulled the book, flipping through its pages, his stomach churning as he read, his voice a tense whisper. "It's a grimoire," he said, his Creole accent thickening with dread. "Spells, rituals, details about summoning that entity LaRue called his master. The DuPonts have been working with it for years, using LaRue to open a gate, to bring it here. They're planning to use it to control the city, turn New Orleans into a vessel for this thing." Eloise's eyes widened, her beads clinking frantically, her voice a shaky whisper. "That's worse than LaRue," she said, her gaze darting to the hallway. "We need to get this to Celeste, get it to the paper. The city needs to know." Before Julian could respond, a scream echoed from downstairs, Celeste's voice, sharp with pain, followed by the hiss of vampires, their growls reverberating through the mansion. Julian's heart pounded, his hand tightening on the grimoire as he shoved it into his coat, his voice a growl. "We need to move now." They ran into the hallway, Clara already gone, her fear driving her to flee, the mansion's opulence now a labyrinth of danger. They reached the grand staircase, Julian's revolver raised, his dark eyes scanning the foyer below where Celeste fought two vampires, her derringer empty, a candelabrum in her hands as she swung, her green eyes blazing with defiance despite the blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. Julian fired his revolver, the gunshot echoing through the mansion, the bullet hitting one vampire in the chest, drawing black blood as it staggered, giving Celeste a moment to break free. Eloise darted down the stairs, her knife slashing at the second vampire, her beads clinking as she fought, her voice a cry of fear and determination. "Celeste, run," she shouted, her blade catching the vampire's arm. Drawing a hiss of pain, Celeste stumbled toward them, her green eyes wide with adrenaline, her voice a tense whisper as she reached Julian, her hand grabbing his arm. "They've got more coming," she said, her journalist's composure fractured by the fight. "Marcel, he's downstairs, calling for reinforcements. We need to go, now." Julian nodded, his jaw tight, his dark eyes meeting hers as he fired another shot, covering their retreat as they ran for the servants' entrance, the vampires' hisses echoing behind them, the mansion's grandeur a stark contrast to the danger closing in. They burst into the garden, the Jasmine scent cloying as they sprinted for the street, the Model T waiting where they'd left it, its engine roaring to life as Julian took the wheel, his side throbbing, blood seeping through his bandages, but his focus unyielding. They sped away from the mansion, the gaslights of St. Charles Avenue blurring past, the city's nightlife a distant hum as they caught their breath, the grimoire a heavy weight in Julian's coat. Celeste pressed a handkerchief to her forehead, her green eyes blazing with resolve, her voice a tense whisper. "We've got proof now," she said, her hand resting on Julian's arm, a gesture of comfort and partnership. "The grimoire, the journal, we can expose the DuPonts, warn the city about this entity. But they'll be coming for us hard." Julian nodded, his jaw tight, his dark eyes fixed on the road, his Creole accent a soft cadence in the tense air. "We'll get this to the paper," he said, his voice gruff, his hand covering hers for a moment, a silent promise to see this through. "But we need to be ready. They'll hunt us now, and that entity. It's still out there." Eloise leaned forward from the back seat, her beads clinking softly, her expression fierce despite the fear in her eyes. "We're in this together," she said, her voice steady, her hand resting on Julian's shoulder. "Let's finish it for New Orleans." The city stretched out before them, its lights a flickering promise of hope and danger, the medallion's glow a faint flicker in the darkness. Julian felt the weight of the future pressing down, the DuPonts, the entity, the price Mama Zora had warned about. New Orleans was a city of shadows, and they were about to shine a light into its darkest corners.